So, what is your name, and can you spell it?
Will Miller, Willmiller.
Where do you live, and have you always lived here?
I live in Indiana, in Lafayette, Indiana, near Purdue University, and I've been coming here for 35 years as the in-law of my wife, who's a native here, but I've only lived here full-time. We have only lived here full-time about 15 years.
What would you miss most if you had to leave Lafayette?
Pretty obviously the friendships that I've established and developed that are like my extended family, my family and my extended family. That would be the hardest.
How would you describe the year 2020, how it's gone for you in one or two words, and then explain why you chose those one or two words?
It's another year of disruption. I've been through these kind of years before. At my age, at 70 years old, I've been through the Kennedy assassination, Martin Luther King assassination, Vietnam. I've been through a lot of topsy-turvy years that have turned the country upside down. This is another one. It's unique, it's different, but we'll get through it. I mean, I'm cautious, but I'm optimistic.
Describe the moment COVID-19 became real to you, and then how it made you feel.
Hearing that there was a pandemic that was sweeping, it didn't become a real and emotional until whatever the day or the week was, that the deaths in New York City began to spike and spiral, and we were all glued to the numbers that were overwhelming the first responders. And I realized this is not just an ordinary crisis. And I was just appalled and, of course, frightened.
How did your daily life change at first, and how has that affected you emotionally?
I have been really blessed because I've always worked remotely or on my own, as a writer or a teacher. I mean, my speaking career, which was pretty active, of course, that was all canceled. But I've made the switch to Zoom and to mediated communication pretty easily. My worry is for my family, obviously, but it didn't change my life in terms of my work. Sally and I've quarantined pretty radically, and I have no desire to come back out from that. I think fools rush in.
You mentioned Sally. So who are you living with, and who do you interact with on a daily basis?
Sally and I.
Sorry.
That's right. Sally and I both retired. We live together in a house that we love, and it's a really good space. Our daughter Tamara and son-in-law and grandson live about a mile away, but we have really kept distant from them. And we've done what a lot of people have done. We also have a son in Fort Wayne and a grandson in Washington, D.C. And then my extended family, I'm one of 7 kids who live in 7 different states. So I've been used to relating remotely to a lot of people. And we've been doing what a lot of people have been doing, cautious visitation with social distancing, where you have cocktails out and you're 10 feet away.
So how has your daily life changed since the pandemic started? How does it, based on how it's changed, how do you feel about your daily life now?
I consider myself blessed and just kind of lucky that I'm able to continue to do all of my work and all of the things that I love and value without really losing any opportunities. Obviously, I miss engagement with people, but I have to tell you, I'm among those who my caution and fear about the virus trumps my urge and desire to get out and mix with other people. I'm really okay not doing that.
So what's been the biggest challenge for you throughout the pandemic?
Well, I think with a lot of people, let me start that again. Like with a lot of people, obviously the economic impact was something that I felt because I earned my living mostly through corporate speaking, and of course that all just evaporated. But I was really blessed. I got some help from the government, the small business loan. But also I've been able to adapt to mediated communication, doing webinars, etc. And so that's been the biggest adjustment, is doing that. But I'm fine.
So how does this challenge compare to other challenges that you faced before?
This doesn't feel day-to-day uncomfortable, but of course there's this nagging fear hanging over you that would someone in the family or would I be diagnosed and get this thing? And then you're down that slippery slope that scares people profoundly, and it would scare me. And you wind up on a ventilator. I mean, do you not survive? And does Sally, wind up in that place, or someone in the family? And I think it's the pending or the impending unknown. Who might get sick in my world? That's quite frankly raises terror.
How will your daily life feel like 2 years from now?
I think my daily life is going to feel richer than ever after this, because I'm an optimist, and I believe that the American culture will change and grow. We will find new heroes, just as the heroes are emerging now in the middle of this. As a therapist, I feel like I'll always have meaningful work. I mean, my area of expertise is stress, anxiety, and depression, which are epidemic in the culture before this. And now, more than ever, I feel like I can be a helping resource for people.
In the challenges you see at work or in your community, what excites you about solving them?
The irony is that with a colleague at Purdue, we have for a long time studied the effects, usually the negative effects, of media and technology, social media, etc. And we have been amused by how that's flipped over, where now this has become a resource that helps us. That more than just the telephone, I can see faces, and it's not a perfect substitute for looking face to face, but it's a pretty good one. And so consequently, I've been able to adapt my therapy practice and my speaking practice to these new technologies, Zoom or whatever, and I feel really good about that. And I think that even after it's safe to come back out, I think I'll always be doing this in some way.
So what 1 or 2 words describe how you feel about the next 5 years?
Mood disorders, anxiety and depression. Before the COVID crisis, 40 million Americans had a diagnosed anxiety disorder. That's just diagnosed. I mean, there were tens of millions more who have a struggle with anxiety, sometimes severe up into panic disorders, panic attacks. And then the other side of that, which is more lethal, is depression. Now, if you think about that range, okay, of your mood, getting low or getting amped up, it interferes with your functioning, quite obviously. And that's my area of interest as a therapist. And so what is it that facilitates that? Well, obviously you can talk about medication, and the more people are alone and isolated and left with their own thoughts and worrisome thoughts, where's this going? Will I be okay? It's a formula. I've been doing a lot of online telehealth sessions on anxiety and some depression, because stabilizing our mood is always the challenge of being a human being. And if you're like an amped up person or a low-key person, keeping them in that range of functioning is health. And this creates challenges to do that. One of the things that's been exciting for me is that this is my area of expertise, certified in this area. And there are a lot of non-pharmacological strategies that I've really been pushing, that we now know from science facilitates lowering your heart rate, lowering your blood pressure, and it's deep breathing, which is undervalued. It is meditation, which is underappreciated, and it's movement out in nature. And if you add those to your day, it will absolutely have a positive effect, almost as much as some of the medications.
So what's a question or a thought that you wanted to share that I haven't been able to touch on?
Mm-hmm. This crisis, I think, has kind of pulled the scab off something that has bothered a lot of people in this culture, and that is the quality of our character, our morality. And, what are the words? Selfishness, taking care of myself. I've been speaking to corporations for a long time, and they always wanted me to talk about stress. And one of the topics that would come up was the exasperation of sometimes some senior or middle-aged executives who were frustrated with what's the cliche, the millennials and their sense of entitlement. And I said, I have a word for you that I think you'll relate to. It meant a lot to me. And this is not just for millennials, it's for you too. One of the reasons that Julian Fellowes' brilliant depiction of Downton Abbey was a look into 19th century aristocracy is it depicted just flawlessly the upstairs family born into that privilege, who were served, but they also had their responsibilities. They were unconflicted about where they were. This is what I've earned. This is who I am. And then downstairs, the servant class who served those upstairs. And he appropriately and brilliantly depicted that the upstairs people never really had a yearning to go downstairs. And the downstairs people didn't have any illusions. I'm born into service. Here's my advice to people. And this is about the character of America. Get up in the morning and go to what you do as if you live downstairs. Go serve. Go serve and shut up about it. When you get home, you can then go upstairs to your own upstairs and pamper yourself and live the privilege that you want to, with whatever it is that makes you feel like you are royalty upstairs. You can do both, but not out at the job. Not out at the job. It's about service.
I have a bonus question. Can you kind of give context of the range of stuff that you're doing in your career and your profession right now, and then talk about your work with the police and fire, and how all of the George Floyd protests are coming all that's colliding.
About 12 years ago, I got asked to be a chaplain for local law enforcement. I said, okay, fine. And that entailed accompanying officers, not only doing some spiritual counseling and some uplifting of spirits, but tellingly it also meant accompanying officers when they do a death notification. The most hated task of a police officer, knocking on someone's door. And one of the great gifts of chaplaincy is that if you knock on someone's door, middle of the night, and they open the door and there's a police officer in uniform, they know it's horrible news. When they see chaplain on my chest, they instantly react that it's horrible news, but it's a different kind of horrible news. And all the pressure leaves the officer and comes to me and allows me to be the person who gives that and offers whatever comfort is available. And so it's valuable. Well, after a while, because I was a practicing psychotherapist and an expert on stress, I told the chiefs, I said, you need to use me more in my clinical. And one of the things that was amazing is PTSD. Police officers, first responders suffer post-traumatic stress disorder at a very high level. And so I said, Chief, I want you to send me for training. And they sent me out to become a certified clinical trauma specialist to understand at a brain level, at an organic level, what this is and what this means. I've been privileged and thrilled to be able to offer counseling for police officers, first responders, and others about what it means to have endured a trauma or multiple traumas, and then how you come back to coping and functioning so that the statistics begin to turn, that police officers die within 5 years of retirement. They commit suicide at a very high level. They become alcoholic. I mean, all of the awfulness that is cliche with cops, what are we doing about it? The only thing to do is to get into their mind, their brain, and their experience and begin the process of disentangling those experiences. I am so privileged to be part of that, a small part of that. It's been one of the great gifts of my life.
And so how have you viewed what's going on around George Floyd and Black Lives Matter and how this all this comes together? I mean, how is it, you've got a very unique perspective.
I'm a 70-year-old white man from New York, which means I grew up, my father worked for the gas company, my mother went to college late and was a teacher, and I grew up where there was some routine, not so much vivid animus toward people of color, just no exposure. I had no exposure to them. My father had it because he worked in Brooklyn. And of course, he had some judgments about that. He wasn't flat out, racist in terms, but he was like all of us, just racially insensitive. We were all in high school when Martin Luther King came on the scene. And because we were very active in our Catholic faith, his voice pierced my heart. And his voice was something that said, I need to rethink this. Now, I am not going to say I've done anything of consequence in those 30 years or so, but I am so welcoming that this is so overdue. It's beyond belief that we're finally having this conversation. It's a shocking and an embarrassing characteristic. It's our original sin, as said. And so I feel elated about the prospect of just cracking this egg open and listening to this. Now, what's the cliche? Oh, I have a lot of friends of color. Well, yeah, I do. And the kind of friends of color I have are kind of, socioeconomically kind of like my peers. But they tell me what they've been through. They've been stopped by officers. This virulent strain that is in police departments. I had a cop tell me, and you've heard this before, no one hates a bad racist cop more than a good cop. It is ruinous to everything that they stand for. But they have never felt free or have permission to step into it. That was the story of that first catastrophe. Those two other officers standing with their thumbs in their ears, not standing up and going, "What are you doing?" That, I think, is a hopeful shred of confidence here, that good cops, I think they know who the bad eggs are, and they're going to be on them and watching them. And if those bad cops haven't gotten the memo yet, they will. So I think that's going to crack one of the eggs open, and then we will see how far it goes, but it can't stop.
Excellent. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
One thing. I'm from a blue-collar family in New York, Brooklyn, one of 7 kids. And we grew up and, again, working class, and we all went to college because that's what we were pushed to do. And then after college, we did what Americans have been doing for decades, and that is we found the love of our life and we went off to do our life, and we left where we were. And we wound up living in 7 different states. My family is nowhere near my routine life now. And I got so affected by that I decided that I was connecting dots, and I met a fantastic colleague, my good friend for years, Glenn Sparks. And for 20 years, we have studied the problem of social isolation, which is the smoking gun behind depression and suicides, etc. And we think it comes down to moving and media. You move away from established relationships. When you land someplace, instead of reconnecting, like we've connected, we wind up being distracted by media and technology that prevents us from doing the hard work of having you become my brother. Let alone, where's the aunt and the uncle? Where's grandma? Where are all these people? We are designed organically to connect with that array of people. We call them refrigerator rights relationships. That's the book we wrote, because refrigerator rights, if you have refrigerator rights, it means you can come into my house and without asking permission, you can be in the intimacy of my home. You can go into my refrigerator, you can go look in the medicine cabinet. People don't have that anymore. We're guests in each other's house periodically. How many people in your life see you in your bathrobe, hear you talk the way your kids hear you talk? Do you have refrigerator rights relationships, America? Nope. And I think that's ruinous. The freedom I have to demonize you because you don't think like me means I've never sat down to talk with you as an intimate to find out what drives you to be on this side of the aisle or that side of the aisle. It's killing us.